Hello, welcome back on a wintry morning in February. I don't know how that hits you, but for me, this is absolutely the hardest time of the year. I think it'd be hard anywhere, but I live in England where the winter is long, light is kind of intermittent, to put it kind of kindly. And by this point in the year, I think most people living here feel a little stagnant, a little stuck, a little frustrated, and really ready for a fresh energy. And I was reflecting on that, and it really made me think about cycles of the year, absolutely, but also cycles of life. And when maybe we feel like we're revving the engine more than actually making progress. And of course, that can be frustrating, but as I have sat in my own still season, I realized that there are a lot of gifts there too. So, what I wanted to talk about today was exactly that kind of the hidden work of quiet seasons, and maybe we could also think about this as like a peek behind the veil, because many of us have times of life where we feel like maybe we're more hidden, and that might mean that we feel like what we're experiencing or what is transforming within us will always remain kind of under wraps. But of course, that isn't true. There's always a blossoming that happens, but the wait to get there can seem interminable. So let's see if we can make it feel a little bit lighter and more hopeful. When I was deciding on a cover for my book, I had a lot of back and forth with people about the visual imagery I wanted to use to convey the feelings of a time of chrysalis and transformation, but also really intense and kind of uncomfortable stillness. And this is this is what I landed on. I'll try to bring it to you so you can see it more clearly. Yeah, there we go. That's good angle. So the picture is it's by a Scandinavian artist who actually did some work for Disney. It's a really lovely image, I think, inspired by a Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale. But and then the fairy tale is called The Story of a Mother, and the woman is embracing a thorny plant, blackthorn, which had told her it was so cold it needed to be warmed up, and she embraces it, and it pricks her flesh, and the warmth of her heart causes the plant to bloom. And there's like a winter landscape and a rising sun, so there's lots there that felt really important to the story. But that idea of really embracing a period of time or an experience of something kind of cold and still and sharp, and allowing it to kind of penetrate you, and the pain to transform into something beautiful feels really thematically appropriate for the story I've told, but also I think a very common experience of human life. So if we think about the cycle of the year, in early winter, we've just come out of a period of harvest, and we've worked really hard, and now we've stored all our grain, we've reaped all of the rewards of our work throughout the entire year, and we come to a point where we can maybe find rest, and we can come together and to celebrate, to be cozy, to sing songs, to tell stories, to have religious celebration, absolutely. And then there's the aftermath of that, which, is also busy in its own way. And we come to a point of stillness in January that I think can feel like relief for a lot of people. There may be depression, as I've touched on before, when you like open your credit card bills, or I guess open your phone these days and just take stock of, what the aftermath of all of that. But also there's a time where there is quiet. People are less social. I've written in other places, my blog, Substack, about how having a new baby in January can be especially hard, because I think there's a natural inward pull uh, to other people. So it might be that you don't feel as supported as maybe you would in other times of year. Of course, those who love you, you hope are going to be there for you, but everyone feels this pull, I think, to kind of come within and to take stock. And then we come to, February, where we are now as I record this, and there's a feeling of stagnation. For me anyway, that we've done the rest thing, we've done the inner reflection. We can see the snowdrops coming up and the daffodils that's happening where I live, and we know that spring is coming, but truly it could be a few weeks away. And that doesn't sound like a lot of time, and it's not a lot of time, but something I really found to be true in my own seasons of this period I'm going to call stagnation, or kind of revving the engine but not really coming forward, is time is this really malleable concept. And a few weeks can truly feel like a lifetime. So in the cycle of a year, of course, a few weeks is nothing. But in the moment, it can feel like much more than that when you're already just at saturation point. It's like in the culture at the moment, for various reasons, there's been people referencing like being on a plane with kids and the last 15 minutes of the flight just being the worst. And you're like, I can just get through this minute. I can get through this minute, the next one. And then, you finally land. And it's not always terrible flying with kids. I feel I always need to caveat that, because there's so many reasons to think that everything in family life is really tough, and it's okay. But if you have been on maybe like an 8-hour flight where, you haven't been watching a movie and just chilling out, you've got your kids with you and it's been a little stressful, perhaps. Though that last little window can just seem like the end is never going to come. And then there are other times where whole years seem to pass in a few days. I think we've all experienced this. And what I've come to understand as I've moved through these seasons myself is that feeling really speaks to the quality and the depth of what is happening inside those moments of time, which might sound a little woo-woo and crazy, but I think is actually a pretty common conclusion to come to for anyone who takes note of the passing of time and feels the caliber and the quality of the experiences they have in relation to that time. So in the cycle of the year, we're in February, we're feeling a little frustrated, a little over it. We're just feeling a little over it, but we know we may have to hold on a little bit longer. Well, that's in the course of a year. What about in the course of your life and the seasons of your life? Some people call these the chapters of your life. And I don't dislike that, but I prefer to think of them as seasons, because sometimes you read a book and you feel like a chapter is never going to end, like a chapter is forever. And season, I think, to me, really there's more of a promise of change in that than thinking about life in terms of chapters. So seasons of life can also have this quality naturally, where there's seasons of expansion, exploration, adventure. That really, those are words I would use to describe my life before I became a mother. I was a foreigner in the United Kingdom at a time when it was really fun and dynamic to live here. There were so many opportunities to explore not only a country that was foreign to me, but like the wider world that I had access to in an easier way. Being based here, I could go so many places in Europe really easily. It felt very easy, expansive, free, fluid. I didn't feel like I had a lot of constraints on me. And even temperamentally, one of the reasons I decided to stay here is I was here for the summer of 2005, which was this just like amazing summer in the UK. I'm still not a cricket fan 20 years on living here, but it was a year when England won this big cricket tournament, the Ashes. So the country was just so like bubbly and fun. And there were these warm, long summer nights because you get really long sunshine here. And that's how that season of my life felt overall. It felt bubbly, fun, social, warm, easy, fluid. And then the next season of my life began. And again, I'm just gonna say, because I think there's just so much in the culture in the moment about how challenging and tough and demanding motherhood is. And it is all of those things. And those are the qualities I'm going to be talking about in relation to motherhood, but it's not just that. There's so much beauty. That's also what I'm trying to bring in here. So when I say that motherhood then brought about this shift into stillness that slowly became stagnation, it's not necessarily an inherent quality of that time of life. It's just how that season hit me, and I think hits many women truly after a season of expansion and fun and freedom and really like low friction to anything that I you might want to do. So, finding myself in a season where there were a lot of constraints on my time, and I didn't experience life as free flowing. I experienced it as having lots of constrictions and requirements and challenges for sure. But it was more than that. It's like requirements, I guess. Uh, that was a pretty abrupt change. And at first, it felt really welcome because I had just gone through this enormous physical feat, bringing new life into the world. And I had been working hard for a very long time. So a period of rest felt good in that respect too, that I could allow myself to fall into a different rhythm and to tend to a much smaller area of focus, a much smaller world actually in a lot of ways, because that, everything you're paying attention to really shrinks right down. So there was a period where that felt good, and then comes the time warp sensation where, in the UK, if you are a woman who's thinking about going back to work, you can stay away from your job for a year, and legally you have the right to return to it. You're not paid for that entire amount of time, but you can take up to a year off and still go back to your same job in theory. And of course, that doesn't always play out exactly as it's meant to, but that's a period of time that we could look at here. I know it's much different in the US, and honestly, that seems so crazy to me based on my own experience. But I think also kind of what's normal in your environment might impact how you think about these transitions, for better or for worse. But so in the course of a year isn't actually that much time. And if you divide that year up into all these developmental milestones, I talk about this a little bit in the book, like, there's, if you're used to structure, there are a lot of ways you can try to look at the early years of motherhood through the lens of structure. And that can be very helpful, except that, people are people and don't, including babies, and so they're not going to follow the structure that's laid out perfectly, and that can lead to frustration or anxiety. It's a strange dynamic in a way, in that children change really quickly, and so in some ways you're almost vigilant. You're almost hyper vigilant to small changes because they're coming around all the time, and they mean you might need to tweak what you're doing, and ultimately you're trying to promote health, and I think the word that's used is thriving. You don't want a child who's like failing to thrive, but at the same time, your own life feels like truly slow as molasses. That's how it felt to me. And so when I was told that a certain phase was going to last like a couple weeks or a couple months, or sometimes a couple years, it felt like eternity. It felt like I was never going to get through that. But when you stand back from it, and I talk to people in the workforce from that perspective of, oh, like women get a year off. Oh, a year is nothing. I mean, life does change quickly, and we're living in very dynamic times, but a year is not that long, and you could go back to work, or not, of course, but you could go back to work and maybe feel like not that much had changed. And in the business, that is, you've probably changed quite a lot. But that perspective is really hard to grasp when you're in the season. And to extrapolate this from just my own experience that I write about, and look at a more universal human picture of seasons, I think most of us feel challenged in these periods of little growth, especially when, kind of the rest period is behind us. We're ready for the next thing, but the season isn't over yet. It's not time to change. The blossoms aren't ready to bloom yet. You can maybe see the seeds and you can feel a little bit more warmth, but it's not there yet. So what's happening in this time? Well, hopefully, if you're not getting too too frustrated, too stalled out, and irritated by the quality of this time, you can get a sense of what's going on. But sometimes that doesn't happen until you have the chance to really step back and reflect. What is happening in the moments of frustration? I really think the frustration is the spark that creates the alchemy, that lights the fire, that brings on the initiation into the next stage. And the challenge of these times is to find the spark, and instead of kind of staying in the stagnant pool of forever waiting. How this looks to me often in my life is, it's cold where I live. I don't have a well insulated house, and I'm always pretty cold, and I'm like walking around in the same clothes I've been wearing since the end of September. And I've got my routine down to try to keep myself warm and motivated to do things, but it stops feeling supportive, and it starts feeling like, a little bit like a straitjacket. And I found this in motherhood too. Routine is such a help to children, and it's a help to parents, to keep everyone healthy and on track. But there comes a point where you've outgrown it a little bit, or a lot, and you need to let go and move on to the next thing. And what I found is the things that I needed next were only going to be found in the seeds of that frustration. If I could really drill down to what it was that was, at the heart of the despair, the irritation, because that's a big theme for me, irritation and frustration. I think it can feel more like apathy to some people, or depression. But for me, definitely like frustration, maybe kind of resentful, that sort of thing. If you can kind of unpick it a little bit and find what's at the heart of that, that is going to light the fire to make the change and create the next season. So that's really what moves you into the next stage. I've talked before about like spirals of life, and how hopefully you're kind of repeating the same things, of course, because we're cyclical beings in a cyclical world. That's just an inherent quality to life on earth. But hopefully, as you're going over these things, you're moving up because you've learned a thing or two. You've transformed something each time we go through winter. We shed something else, or we integrate something else, or we have some new insight that maybe brings us around to something not even that different from what we've done before, but it's on a different level, it's on a different plane, it's on another level of consciousness. And I've also spoken before about the power and the transformational quality of repetition. It's no accident that is a quality of life here on earth, that we learn things through repetition. Many spiritual traditions include prayers and chants and song that are done again and again and again. I've been doing some research for my forthcoming fiction work about the Ottoman Empire. And in Istanbul, in Topkapi Palace, where the sultans lived, there was a room dedicated to reading the Quran, and someone sat there and read the Quran, the entire thing, 24 hours a day. So it was constantly being put out into the world audibly and just repeated. So that quality of just repeating the same words, it was recognized to have power. And so these seasons, these cycles, really do move something in us. And it's good to remember that at this time of year or this season of life, if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling stagnant, maybe a little hopeless, that there's a reason this is coming up. There's a reason why you're starting to feel shackled. And if you can come to a sense of what the heart of it is for you, you can break through that shell and move on to hopefully a better next cycle. Because um, the downside of this sort of quality to life is if we don't pay attention or we don't learn things, which doesn't necessarily mean incessant navel gazing, but if we don't learn, then you can end up repeating the exact same thing without moving things up and onwards, and that's not what we want to do. And if you do that, it's okay, because you get another chance. You always get another go to like move something along. But hopefully, especially as you get older, you recognize the power of these moments to make the pattern new, to move the cycle on. And this is true, excitingly, I think, not only for you, but for all the generations to come. And this is something that I've realized very powerfully in motherhood. It's definitely something I talk about in my memoir and also just in my life, that the epigenetic and ancestral patterns that you're moving through are also cyclical. There are so many wild stories I could tell you about things in my life that have happened almost exactly as they happened to my mother. Very different things. For example, just one small example, she met my father and ended up leaving her home and never went back to Pennsylvania, where she was from. And they actually moved. We moved as a family to England, and when I was a teenager, and so she was going back and forth to see her parents from this island to Florida, where they lived. All these years later, I married a foreigner and left my country. It's been 20 years. Maybe I'll go back. I don't know. But so far, that's not how it's gone. And I fly back to America to see my family. And who knows what will happen with my kids. But there are lines through your life that connect with the stories of the past and the stories of the future. And the way we move things on is through pattern recognition. It's really that simple, actually. And again, it doesn't require a lot of very self-focused, self-centered, self-oriented navel gazing. It can just be through presence. So you don't have to endlessly navel gaze and self-focus, self-fixate, self-obsess. You can still be of service and be like a fantastic partner, wife, sister, mother, part of the community. You can have other interests. It's not all about just endlessly gazing into the crystal ball and trying to puzzle everything out. In fact, sometimes that's counterproductive. But the great medicine, I think, is presence. And when we're in great discomfort because we feel stagnant, frustrated, irritated, get me the hell out of here, it can be hard to be present. But if you can cultivate presence, that's really where the pattern recognition comes in. It can settle into your psyche. And even if you're not able to articulate it, you don't necessarily have to be able to do that, but you just have to allow the understanding to permeate you and let it begin to move you in new ways, because it will. It will. And if you do have a realization around what this is, I can't say enough good, powerful things about writing it down, crystallizing it into being, and really celebrating it in some way. The project of writing a memoir for me has been profoundly transformational in so many ways, and one of them absolutely is that it's this distillation of a pattern that I was able to recognize and transmute in so many ways. And I've set that down, and it's a testimony now for my children and actually for generations back, because a lot of people in my extended family have read it. And that feels like such a powerful gift. And I'm very grateful that many people helped me cultivate enough presence, as uncomfortable as that was when I just wanted to move to Casablanca or something, and not deal with the hardships of my life. Being able to be present with them instead has given me just absolutely the most profound gifts. And not only that, but sitting with the irritation and really understanding the source of it. And I still don't think I perfectly understand the source of it, because I don't think we get to perfectly understand anything on this planet. But I've understood enough that I'm moving in a new way. So that pattern has cycled through, and of course I'm carrying on with some of it, but it's moving in a new way, and that feels very exciting. And all of that happened at a time in my life where I wasn't leaving the house that much. I was caretaking little children, sick children, in a foreign country with no family around, wild stuff. Not as wild as some people, the ride some people are on, but enough that I found it, it was definitely behind a veil. And when I released my book and people close to me in my life read it, so many of them said that they had no idea what was going on for me. And I'm sure that's true for many of us. In fact, I know it's true for many of us. I have a friend who got divorced a few years ago, and she just said she couldn't believe how even close friends of hers seemed to have no idea what was really at stake for her and what was going on. And it was very random people who she didn't know that well who actually were more supportive. It's funny how life works in that way. But I think sometimes it's almost that the deepest transformational work has to happen behind a veil, from the perspective of those who are closest to us, because they're often very wrapped up in the pattern that we may be dissolving or changing or completing or cycling into something new. That's just my theory anyway. So if you find yourself this time of year in the micro, or in a season of life in the macro where you're like, where am I going? I'm not getting anywhere. I'm trying this, I'm trying that. I'm so stuck. Um, know that there is great work being done. I put it that way, great work, because I think so many of us are oriented towards work and oriented towards progress that is measurable in some way in the language of work. So it's not going to look like the work you might normally that you would want to be doing, that you would normally be doing. It's quiet interior work, but if you can have presence with it, I promise you, it's more powerful than the periods of great expansion, where my experience is that your energy is often more scattered, more diffuse, a gift in its own way. But then the narrow channel has great benefits. So I hope that gives you comfort in a time of year when I think many of us need it, and a time on the planet when many of us need it, a time in your own life when maybe you need it. On the other side, the light is bright, and even today, as I film this, there's some light. The rain has let up, so thank you, England, for that. Thanks so much for spending time with me. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. It really does so much to help the channel reach more people. If you're listening on Spotify or wherever you find your podcasts, a review is similarly helpful and so greatly appreciated by me. You can find me on a few other places. I'm on Instagram at Kari the Wolf and Substack at Kari the Wolf. And my memoir that I mentioned, No Prayer More Powerful, is linked in the description and available wherever good books are sold. I hope the end of winter treats you gently. I hope the seeds of spring are already blossoming in your heart, and I look forward to joining you next time for more fun chat.